This episode is sponsored by Audible. Get a free audiobook of your choice that you get to keep with their free trial. You can learn more at lutherancartographer.com/audible. The Lutheran Cartographer, Episode 76. Welcome to the Lutheran Cartographer, the podcast where we explore what it's like to be Lutheran in different places. I'm your host, Nicholas Weber. Today we are going to Wartburg, Tennessee to talk to Pastor David Greggs. He is the pastor of St. Paul Lutheran Church there in Wartburg. Pastor Graves, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us about where we are. Where is Wartburg, Tennessee?
Wartburg, Tennessee is situated in the beautiful Cumberland Mountains of Tennessee in the eastern part of the state. If we were to tell somebody who asked, hey, where's Wartburg? We'd say it's in the Knoxville metropolitan area, which it is. It's just west and north of Knoxville. If you know where Oak Ridge, Tennessee is, we're just about 25 minutes west and north of there. So within mountain driving, that's a little bit longer of a time. However, it's probably about 15 or so miles outside of Oak Ridge and about 20 or so, a little bit more than that miles outside of Knoxville. Not sure of miles, I know time. But we would say Knoxville's about 45-minute drive from us. We're proudly in East Tennessee up in the northern part of the mountains. The ranges out here, which is the Cumberland. South of Knoxville is where you have the Smoky Mountains. So we're just north of there.
I see. Some of the other people that we've interviewed notice a divide between parts of the state. So, for example, in South Dakota, you have East River and West River, where you have two different cultures. You mentioned East Tennessee. Is that just a geographical orientation, or is it also a cultural one?
Both. So there are three grand divisions of the state of Tennessee: West, Middle, and East. Our state flag has three stars in it. It's the most prominent symbol that we have in Tennessee that most people notice, even more so than the state seal. And we're very proud of our state flag because it shows that unity between the three grand divisions. The East is known for its mountains, especially the Great Smoky Mountains. We're in a different mountain range, but we're all part of that same Appalachian mountain region, which characterizes East Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is characterized by Nashville, more of a rolling hills sort of area, a very different culture there. In the West, characterized by Memphis and the Mississippi River, very flat plain land where there was a lot of farming agriculture. Not as much here in the East. Tennessee anymore, especially in the middle and the East, is aimed more towards the entertainment industry and different industries that have popped up here and businesses moving here from all around the country because of Tennessee's very friendly business climate.
I see. So let's turn to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to Wartburg.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Columbia, Missouri. That's where my family largely resides, except for my brother and his family live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I went to Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, where I got my bachelor's degree in religion and a minor in classics with Latin. There I converted to Lutheranism. I was actually raised in the evangelical church, the independent Christian churches, or the Campbellite movement. But it's something that they don't hold as much to or say they hold as much to, but that's what it is. And in college, I converted to Lutheranism. I was looking for something deeper, something richer, something that had a little bit more depth to it. And I found it in confessional Lutheranism, became a Lutheran in 2006. And those around me who showed me my way into the Lutheran Church were very encouraging, saying, hey, you should become a pastor. And so I went to Concordia Seminary in St. Louis in 2009 after I graduated college, and I was called here in May of 2013. I was ordained in June of 13, and I was installed here in August of 2013. I've been here ever since.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about making that transition from evangelicalism to Lutheranism. Before we started recording, you mentioned that the area around you is a little evangelical. It's a different kind of evangelical, right? Where you are now?
Vastly different.
Okay.
Yes. Here in Wartburg, it is characterized by a strong independent Baptist flavor. They wouldn't even call themselves evangelical. They're very much Baptist and a very particular view within the Baptist tradition. I was raised in something that was an offshoot of that, more so the Campbellite Restoration movement, sort of, we are the repristinated church from the original first century Christians. Everything in between us was a great apostasy, and we're reviving the true Christian church. That was pretty much where I came from. And they're peculiar and different from Baptists in the fact that they believe in baptismal regeneration. They have communion every Sunday. However, they believe that communion is very symbolic, and they have a very different take on a few other things, especially what the church is. They would view baptismal regeneration as important, but they would also say it has to be done as an adult, it has to be a decision. So you get this weird blending of different beliefs, and people who are familiar with the Church of Christ can see they're part of that tradition as well, and that's the closest thing you can compare it to. Becoming confessional Lutheran from that, the biggest difference was communion. That was a huge deal, especially as in the Midwest, where to believe in the body and blood truly present in communion was a big jump from where I was, which is just a symbol. Baptism wasn't a huge leap. We already believed in regeneration. It was just sort of, hey, this works for babies too. And that wasn't a huge bridge to gap. It wasn't something that was really, really hard to do for me. It was more, hey, communion being more central and more important, and elevating that was more, it wasn't for me, I would say, a personal struggle. It was putting those pieces together. And once they all fit, you can't go back to anything else. Honestly, you just can't. Once you hear the gospel, once you encounter Jesus as he truly is for the first time and read the Bible, this was the biggest thing, reading the Bible in context. That was a massive, massive leap. There are similarities here in people's journeys to Lutheranism as they are trying to make sense of that conversion. However, it's more centered here in baptism. That's more the issue that we encounter. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's return to the question of what things are like there in a little bit. But before we get there, I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you like best about the Wartburg area?
Well, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country. I've not seen anything anywhere like it in my life. I've been to Colorado, I've been to LA, and you mentioned before, hey, this time of year in Washington is absolutely beautiful. I've not been there, but from what I've seen of the country, it's absolutely beautiful place. The mountains are gorgeous, and we're actually in a place where it's considered a temperate rainforest. So it's a different climate, and it's a different sort of scenery than you'd see in some other parts of the country. It's very much part of the Appalachian Mountain area, and I'd say the people here are absolutely wonderful, very, very kind. They are very loving. I was told before I came to the South by a professor, he said, listen, I did ministry in the South for years. You're going to have to listen to a lot of things that may shock you. You may have to see a bunch of things you didn't think you'd see, but if you can get through all that, you have a friend for life. And that's true. You put in, or you get out what you put in here. People aren't going to run up to you and want to say, oh, hey, come do this, this, and this. There's a give and take. But if you can show that love for them, they will love you no matter what. And they are very, very welcoming. People come in from all over the country to move here, and they kind of expect it's going to be like where they're from. Here, it takes a little bit more work. But if you put that work in, you're just as much part of this community as if you were born here. They're absolutely wonderful people. You have to show that you love and appreciate them. I think because for generations, they've been shown quite the opposite by most people. But once you do, you have friends for life, and you have more than that. You have almost like a family, and it's a very tight-knit community, very caring community, and one that I'm very, very proud and honored to serve. I'm privileged to do that.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like there's a real community spirit that relies on the participation of its members as kind of the ticket to admission rather than birth or heritage?
I'd say it's a both and. I think if you're not from here, yeah, you gotta you gotta prove it a little bit. You gotta show us that you care. But it's well worth it if you do, and it doesn't take as much as you think. It's just simply showing interest and caring for people and showing that you do care about it. It doesn't take a whole lot to get in there. I think people sit back and they want people to show up at their house and do all these things. Like, no, if you move here, you gotta be part of something. You gotta get involved. And if you are, that's awesome. If you just stay by yourself, well, then you're going to be by yourself because no one's going to come and see you. But if you show up here, oh yeah, they'll help you no matter what.
That's great. Let's talk about the flip side. What are some of the challenges about the area?
The challenges are, I would say, growing up in the city. I'm from Columbia, Missouri, where Walmart is 2 minutes away from my dad's house where I grew up. And so the convenience of living in the city and going to the grocery store within a couple minutes, saying, hey, I can go get this real quick and be back, and it's going to take me less than half an hour to go do this, is a big shock. Live in an area where it's a bit more rural. However, we're in the East. So I was a vicar in Connecticut, and it kind of reminds me of that, where you have these little townships and they kind of butt up against each other. Same thing here. In Missouri, if you're out in the country, it's like, well, here's your town, and 10 miles away, there's another town, but in between that, there's nothing. That's not how it works here. I can hit a different town once I go down the highway to Knoxville and not see empty farmland. It's going to be one town to the next town to the next town. So that's a little different to where it's a little bit more rural. And if you want to go to Walmart, yeah, you got to go to Oak Ridge or go south to Herriman, or if you want to go to Target, you got to go to Knoxville to do that. I get used to driving to get to places you want. But the convenience part, yeah, we don't have that. It takes a little bit, but we have plenty of things near. It's not like we have to go hours and hours to get what we want. If you get to Knoxville, you have literally everything you have in a major U.S. city. They have it all. So it's not hard to go do things you want. You just got to drive a little bit. I'd say the flip side of social challenges are that, yeah, in a small town, things can get cliquey, and trying to break through that does take, like I said, some effort, but it's not as hard as you think, especially if you're involved in a place like the church. And sometimes when people get so close to you and so in your business, resentment can form at times. And so those tight-knit relationships can change, and they can unfortunately break apart from time to time. So there is the human side to the good and bad here, and we have it all just like anywhere else. But I think the biggest challenge for me is the religious challenge, which is, of course, being in a culture that's dominated by the Independent Baptist Church and its views on what is socially acceptable, what is religiously acceptable, and doctrinally what is to be taught and believed, and a very, I'd say, very narrow and very strict adherence to that, and that expectation for everyone here. And if you don't fall in line with that, there's some conflict, either inadvertently or directly, and that is a challenge for a lot of our people, and has been since we've been here 175 years.
I see. Well, let's go on and talk about that. What's it like to be Lutheran there in the midst of all these independent Baptists?
There's two ways to look at it. I'd say the first way is it's wonderful. Coming from the Midwest, I'd say this is a wonderful place to be a Lutheran because we have to really focus on what matters. We have to really be concerned with what is absolutely essential about who we are. And so the arguments that you hear about in places where Lutheranism is more dominant, sort of the color of the carpet controversies and things like that. Yeah, you'll have that from time to time here, but not that much. You don't have well, I'm not liking this style or that, so I'm going to go to this other church down the street that's Lutheran and that. We have to get along. We have to work through our conflict. We have to speak to one another because there is nowhere else to go. You have to drive down to Herriman or Oak Ridge every Sunday morning to go to another Lutheran church. And the people here were planted here almost 175 years ago. Next year is a 175th. So there's a lot of family connection. But now for the local community, people who are converting to Lutheranism, there's a very intense love for the church and for the community and for the congregation that's welcomed them in, especially they've been affected for years and years. So you could say it's a really great place to be a Lutheran because when you're in the minority, you become a little bit more devout, and you see that devotion very intensely in a place like this when you're surrounded by, lack of a better word, opposition. The negative thing is socially, it becomes very difficult for our families and for our young people who are confronted by those who either just don't understand what they believe or are opposed to what we believe, and largely out of ignorance, and will be called weird or strange or mocked or made fun of or maybe ostracized a bit from certain things. And that's, especially in the past, been a very big problem. It's been a really big problem when it comes to certain aspects of school life, when they're confronted by sometimes teachers and sometimes classmates. But more and more, I think that's not as intense as it was, but that sort of, well, you're different than us and we don't like this sort of flavor is still pretty strong, and it's everywhere. So it is difficult because people just look at you as Scots and go like, I don't get this, I don't understand it. And they also refuse to dig in. So it takes making those relationships and educating people on what Lutheranism is. And once they understand that, they have a much more positive view. But if they just look at you, make up their mind, and go about their way, they're just going to believe all sorts of weird things that most of the time aren't even true, or they're taken out of context. And to give examples, someone said, to one of our kids, "Don't you all celebrate Hanukkah?" We're not even in the same ballpark there. And so you hear some really strange stuff, and you can say, this is just a lot of ignorance. But once people come to understand, they become very interested and they become very positive towards it. Go like, wow, you're just like our older siblings in the faith. And I compare it to like this. I said, we're like your great aunt. You're an offshoot of the Anglican Church, and we're more connected to mom, but your grandma's our sister. So the family pictures are similar, but the furniture is pretty different.
Very different. You talked before we started recording about what independent Baptists were in that area and what some of their practices were. Could you share a little bit with our listeners so they understand kind of when you say that it's different and the furnishings are different, what does that other furniture look like? And how does it affect how you talk to them?
Well, it's more about the emphasis of what worship is. In a town or in a county, we really go by county population. We have a small town, it's 1,000 people. Ironically, St. Paul Lutheran Church founded the town, hence the name Wartburg. They're the ones who named it, they're the ones who founded it. It was meant to be a German community. But we are surrounded by 120 different Baptist churches for 20,000 people in Morgan County. It's a small county, it's a depressed county in East Tennessee, but we have tons of churches. Most of those churches are made up of 20 people or less. They're not really big, and a lot of them are products of being fractured. They're split from this, split from that. Independent simply means they're going to be very similar to Southern Baptists in their theology. However, they don't require education for their pastors. They are independent in the fact that they don't give to the Southern Baptist convention for missions, but also they have a view of the church that's very, very different. So they view that Jesus only ordained the local congregation. So when you're baptized into that congregation, into that local church. There's no understanding of a universal church, a universal Christian church. But if you don't do it this way, and if it's not like this, then you're just out. You have no part of it.
Oh, wow.
I think those deeper understanding of Baptist theology can get through that nuance. So I don't want to be unfair to what they believe. But in effect, that's ultimately it. It has a strong connection to kind of Calvinism, but it's been kind of garbled through, and it's kind of mixed with decision theology. So what you end up getting is the notion of what is church, what is ministry, are some of the biggest differences that we have, let alone baptism itself, which they are very big on. It's only decision, it's merely symbolic. You have to get saved. You have to have this personal experience that guarantees your salvation, and you are once saved, always saved. What that ends up doing in our community is that you have a lot of people who just don't go to church. People think, oh, in the South, they're very good churchgoers. Well, on Easter, if you crunch the numbers on Easter, and this is pre-COVID, only 25% at most of people are in church that day. 75% of people in the county don't go anywhere. Yet we'll say we're of the Baptist religion, or we're of the Baptist faith, but they don't have any congregation, they don't have a pastor, and they don't practice Christianity whatsoever. So you have this notion, well, I got saved, so there's nothing left for me to do. So I don't have to do any of this. And when we have people come to us, it's generally, I was told I was going to hell all the time if I took a drink of beer. They're very, very big into teetotalism. So if you take one drink of beer, you're going to hell. It's a lot of that. And the more kind of old-fashioned extreme version of what Baptists are, it hangs on here. The independent Baptists are distinct from Southern Baptists in some ways, but to a Lutheran, it would all look the same. However, they'd be a little bit more on the moralistic and legalistic side of things. This is the way it has to be. You have to live like this, and everything ends up being religious law.
That's too bad. I want to go back to something you said earlier and what you said, just to make sure that I understood it. You said that they practice baptism for a congregation. So not only do you they would teach that if you they wouldn't call it transferring, but if you went to another congregation, you'd need to be rebaptized there then?
Generally, yeah.
Huh. Wow. Okay.
Because that's the symbol of membership in that church.
Let's take a moment for a word from our sponsor. Folks, if you like podcasts, you will enjoy Audible. It's a service that gives you an audiobook to listen to each month of your choice from a large library. And they want to get you started with a free trial offer that includes an audiobook that you get to keep. So go to lutherancartographer.com/audible to get your free audiobook and start your free trial today. If you're not sure what book to check out, I'd recommend taking a look at Pastor Brian Wolfmueller's Has American Christianity Failed? Pastor Wolfmueller was a guest on episode 9, and his book on American Christianity goes through the various pitfalls that you see in big box churches as well as American evangelicalism in general. Well worth checking out. Start your free trial today at lutherancartographer.com/audible. Let's get back to our guest. Let's go on and talk about what it's like to raise a family there.
Sure. People come from all over the country now to come to East Tennessee to have a family because of the pressures of parts of the country that are going in a direction that are just not good for, let's say, what we believe as Christians. It's becoming less and less moral. It's becoming more and more relativistic, and it's becoming more and more attached to the spirit of the age. Tennessee doesn't really hold to that as a whole, especially in areas like Wartburg. You're not going to find anything close to sort of the more bizarre manifestations of modern culture like you would on maybe the coast or in some big cities. So people come here because Tennessee's big on freedom. You have personal freedom to live the life you want, but especially it's more culturally conservative in a lot of ways. Even Knoxville, you would say, is a large city, and it's far more conservative than anything close to it as a college town. I grew up in a college town. I don't consider Knoxville to be like a college town. It doesn't have the same sort of liberal college town flavor to it. It's even more socially conservative. So people really like that about here. So I'd say it's a wonderful place to raise kids. You're not going to have some of the same worries here that you would in other parts of the country. And it's a big attraction for a lot of people these days. So, I mean, I'm all positive about why it's great for families. And there's a lot of great opportunities for families to get together and a lot of things to do. I mean, I always say, if you're bored in Tennessee, that's your fault. Because there's literally something to do all the time year round. This is such an active state, and a state that's so rooted in entertainment. It's in your face. Coming from Missouri, looking back, I'm like, wow, that's a boring place compared to Tennessee, where there's live music everywhere all the time, and having something to do is pretty easy. It's not hard to find something to do here. Like I said, if you sit around the house and you're bored, that's your problem. There's plenty to do every single day. So for families, this is really a wonderful place, a very affordable place to live. You're not going to spend a whole lot, especially raising a family, but it's friendly to families, and I think it's a great place for families to be. And our congregation is very centered on our families, and that it's a family church, especially for children.
That's really good to hear. What educational options are there in the area? Is there a Lutheran school?
We have a preschool. So we have an early childhood education center that we run and has been run for 40 years. And we have amazing teachers. That those years are so critical. And I think the challenge here is to teach people about, hey, these years are really, really important, really critical, and you want the highest level of education and support you can for preschoolers. People want to opt towards free, but I said, hey, this is really a great thing. And the results speak for itself. It's a wonderful, wonderful school. And I couldn't be more proud of it. We have local public schools. We have a local high school, and there's 4 high schools in the county between Wartburg, Sunbright, Oakdale, and Cofield. And they each have corresponding elementary schools, and there's a middle school here in Wartburg as well, in addition to homeschooling, which is becoming more and more popular.
Good deal. I want to talk about 2 things that you mentioned earlier in the interview and kind of bounce them off each other and see what you think. One thing that you mentioned earlier was that because of the Lutheran orientation and the Lutheran confession, that sometimes people look at you sideways and sometimes kids get kind of remarks at school because they are different. How would you recommend, and then later you talked about how you can fit in with the community by putting in the work and by showing people that you care about them. How would you recommend to a family that's maybe starting out in Wartburg, where they are Lutheran and they are committed to that confession, but they also want to be good neighbors and to get along with their neighbors? How did you go about navigating that, and how would you recommend that, say, a parishioner navigate that?
Sure. Well, the outlet for us, of course, is the church. To be ourselves, to celebrate what we believe, and to share that with our neighbors who are in desperate need of it, which is the gospel. And here's the big thing that draws people. Here's what we have gotten deeper into, and I think which speaks to so many people. It's not quibbling over denominations. Where is the true visible church? Where's the word preached in its fullness and the sacraments rightly administered? And we embrace the fullness of that Christian tradition. As one of our pastors in the area said, he said, Wartburg, that's where you have the universal church expressed, where we see the depth and the beauty of the wholeness of Christianity as seen through the Lutheran confessions. People gravitate towards that because it's something that I think people really need. They really want to be part of. They want to be Christian, but they want to be Christian in its fullest sense. That's what we offer people. So we start at the congregational level when you're saying, I'm seeking this, I want to start out here, I want to live here. Well, yeah, make those connections and those relationships within the church. But most people in the county are not going to immediately discount you because you're a Lutheran. They want to see you as a person. They want to know if you're someone that they can relate to as a human being, someone they can befriend. And they care about that far more than affiliation. I think I wouldn't bring up or be argumentative right off the bat. It's more a kind of a conversation that says, okay, well, let me share with you what we believe, rather than you're wrong and this is terrible. That doesn't get anywhere. And rarely will you come across people like that. And Southern manners kind of prohibit really aggressive conversation most of the time. So you're not going to run into that, but that's kind of the underlying feel. And sometimes it comes up here or there and it's really frustrating. However, most of the time, I think people want to see you as a person. And if you want to start here and be part of the community, just get to know people, talk to people, make friends with people, because they're just people like anyone else. But we got to keep in mind they're people who have been not treated well, I think, as a whole for a long, long time. And to show people that kind of care and that love, and you're not looking down on them, you're not judging them, because we live in a historically poor part of the country, but actually you want to be friends with them, you want to be close to them. That's going to speak more to them than anything else. And then everything else can come after. But I'd say making friends and just being a part of the community, just going out and shopping in town and meeting people in town. And, heck, why not go the dirt track race? Why not go with people down the lake, go on the boats there in the mountain lakes that we have here? I mean, that's, I think, the best way to go about it. There's tons to do and a lot of opportunities to meet people. Again, it's a small town, so you're not going to go unnoticed for long out and about, we see it.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about one of the things that you mentioned just now, and that is that people feel a little forgotten in Appalachia. Let's talk about what that means, and what would you say to our listeners who aren't familiar with Appalachia?
This whole region, especially the Appalachian Southeast, has been neglected for a long, long time. If you read Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, that's a really good explanation of what life here has been like. I read that and I said, well, there's a lot of Wartburg there. Where people have been kept, especially since the early days, you can keep in mind it's a very clannish sort of area, and not the bad clan, but sort of the Scotch-Irish heritage clannish, to where very tight-knit groups. They were known for not letting many people in. At the same time, there's not huge industry out here. For a long time, it was coal mining. There are a lot of mining operations here where they would do mining in the mountains. And historically, miners were not treated all that well. They were basically, as you hear in the old country song, "I sold my soul to the company store." 16 tons, what do you get, right? Well, that's kind of the story of this area. And so ever since Reconstruction, especially, the people here have been kept even more in generational poverty, to where it's historically depressed, and some of those depressed, forced areas of the whole country are out here in Appalachia. And as time went on, you had the Depression come at a different time, where, everybody was very poor in the 30s. However, the lack of jobs post-World War II really hit the Southeast in a bad way, and most people went up to Chicago or to Ohio or to Michigan, to the Rust Belt areas to work. And then when those jobs kind of fell away, they came back and moved back here. Only till recently has Tennessee seen a real boon in economic development, to see a real boon in businesses coming and showing up. For a long time, it was just, not a whole lot to sustain the area. And so, and especially recently with the opioid epidemic, with heroin abuse, pill abuse, but especially pill and methamphetamines, huge problem out here. People run to drugs when they give up hope. They don't have a career. They don't have a job. They are stuck in poverty. They don't feel they can get in or get out of. That's been passed down generation to generation. And so they're promised so much, we're going to help you with this, and nothing ever comes through. So there's a real distrust of outsiders from time to time that you can get a sense of, but more distrust of government. And that's why out here it's kind of a different mindset in the world. And yes, they feel very much looked down on by others. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous, because you're looking down on some of the best people I've ever known in my life. And they've always been part of that class, the working poor. But it seems that people just say, hey, we can disregard them. And when you hear about things like privilege and that, well, and some kernels of that may be true, well, it certainly doesn't hold true here. Where people stay in a certain state. That's certainly not everybody. But that historically has characterized this area, and has been manifestly a problem for 100 years or more. And it's always been an issue here. Doesn't mean that they're less than. Like I said, I love living here, and I think a lot of people do. But you start to get a little craven, or a little distrustful if you keep seeing people promise you things and you just back your head, that's never going to happen. So again, you have incredible people, but unfortunately, I think have been treated very poorly for a long, long time.
Absolutely. Any paths that we haven't gone down yet that you think we need to explore as well?
No, I think, the thing I'll finish with is just kind of the remarkable resilience of Lutheranism in this environment, and how it's really is so robust, and how it's, especially today, and we've seen for the past few years. I had six adults in confirmation. This year, I have another class coming up. I've never done 2 classes in 1 year for adults, but there's usually an adult class every year. I baptized a whole family back in 2019 who are coming away from this. Another family in 2017, another family in 2018. And there's usually adult baptisms with each one, because as much as they're raised Baptists, they were never baptized, because you get baptized when you're ready, when you feel that you're ready to commit your life. So there's a lot of unbaptized people here. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that's growing because the word is getting out more and more, and people are explaining, especially their converts, what they believe, and more people are saying, "Hey, I want that because what I was raised with is crazy." I don't want that in the podcast. I don't want to demean people too much. I was raised with this absolutely nuts, and I want to be a Christian, but I don't want to do that. I want to be a Christian. So they see it for the first time, they're just like, "Wow, this is it," and they become very devout.
That's great. I want to jump back to the Appalachia question. What do you think? I think there's a temptation, especially when we aren't in a place that we understand exactly what to do, to jump to a solution. But what would you say to somebody who's coming into this area without saying, oh, this is how you fix it? What would you say, this is how you live here successfully? Does it go back to that, just letting people know that you're present and that you're here and you're committed to them? Or is there something else that somebody coming in should know?
No, I think that's it. I think they should be aware of the history. They should be aware that it's a small town, and small town is small town, no matter what part of the country you're in. And small town comes with all of its goods and its bads and its ups and its downs. There's things that are helpful about living in a small town. There's things that can be less convenient. And so I think if you're just kind of aware of that background, that's good. But also know that you're in the South, and Southerners have a slower pace of life. They have a different pace of life, a different outlook, and they want to bring you to be part of that. If you impose upon them, well, I'm from Ohio, and this is the way things go in Ohio, or I'm from Indiana, and this is how things go in Indiana. This is what you can do. You're not going to get a good audience on that. You're not going to get a lot of people buying into that. They want you to be part of their culture, which I put it to you, is pretty awesome. A slower pace of life, taking things easy, has its benefits. It has some downsides when you want to get things done in a more quicker fashion, but they want you to slow down and be with them, and they don't really want to conform to what you think is right, but they want you to be part of their life and their community, and to slow down, take it easy, and get to know people, and to say, hey, we're not in a rush, we're here. And just really the first thing that you mentioned is the important. Be present, show people you care, you want to be part of it, and just be a regular person that wants to be with them and get to know them. And it takes some time. It takes a little bit longer than other places. But once you're in there for life.
Great. Earlier in the podcast, you mentioned that if you're bored in Tennessee, it's your fault. So let's talk a little bit more about what things you'd recommend seeing or doing, or places to eat. If you have a friend coming into the area, where would you say, we got to go here?
Oh, well, if a friend coming in the area, if they just stay for a day, I mean, they're going to be overwhelmed because we got to do everything. We're known here for the Obed Scenic and Wild River National Park. It's actually a national park that we have here, and this is a destination actually from people from Wisconsin or Washington, where you're from, who come here to climb. Because when it's cold and wintering up there, it's not so bad down here. So they love to come down here. Those are northern climates who are big climbers, come down here to climb. We're home to the Frozen Head State Park, which is the site for the Barkley Ultra Marathon. Some people have seen that on Great Big Story years ago. It became very, very popular here to see. Everyone's real excited to see Morgan County featured, but people come from all around the world just to race in the Barkley Ultra Marathon. If you want to know what that is, look it up on YouTube. There's a great big story about it. Really cool. It happens once a year. There's a little version of it that happens in a different part of the year, but it happens right here in Morgan County, literally down the street. Absolute beautiful mountains. People can hike, a lot of outdoor things to do. Our natural beauty is the big draw for people to come to Morgan County. So that is there in spades. We now are starting breweries. Some of our members have actually begun their own brewery, which is Moco Brewing Project. You also have others that have sprung up over the years, but the first one, Wartburg, is founded by members of St. Paul, and it's become a really popular place, especially on the weekends. And around it, businesses have begun to grow up more and more. So there's more things to do in Wartburg. There's more things to do within the town, but we are just really spitting distance from the Great Smoky Mountains, Knoxville, Oak Ridge. There's a lot to do. The old prison here, Brushy Mountain State Prison, which was Old Crow Medicine Show did a song about that not too long ago on their album Remedy, is now converted from a prison into a restaurant and to a tourist site. And so that's a place a lot of people like to go to and visit. They have a distillery there as well. And moonshine distilling has been a big thing in Tennessee since about 08, 09, when it became legal. And Old Smoky, I believe is the name of it. Distilling opened in Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg is only about an hour, 20 minutes from us in the heart of the Smoky Mountains. It's kind of like Branson, Missouri, if you've ever been there. It's a Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area is really big for tourism. People come to see shows and they go to dinner shows. They go to all these fun things for kids. Dollywood is famous for having Dollywood there, and Pigeon Forge, Dolly Parton helped build up that community from abject poverty to now being one of the biggest entertainment centers of the whole state in the Southeast region. And it's completely transformed from when she was a kid to where it is now. And you see that same thing happen in Gatlinburg, where it's nothing but entertainment. Smoky Mountains have so much to do. We have lakes where you can go down and spend time on the lake. You get a lake house for the weekend, go on the boat. It's a wonderful time there. And Knoxville has everything you can want in a big city, from Market Square to Turkey Creek, everything in between. There's a whole lot to do and to see in East Tennessee. And like I said, if you're bored, it's your fault, because we have everything from amusement parks to natural beauty to just chilling out on the lake or chilling out in the mountains or just going down and being entertained in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge. Going even in places like Maryville, there's places you get on and raft down the river. It's just, there's so much to do.
Great. So now as we start to close out the podcast, before I ask my closing questions, I want to make sure to give you the opportunity to point our listeners where you'd like. Your church's website, places to follow you online. Where would you like to point our listeners?
So we're pretty active on Facebook. Just look up St. Paul Lutheran Church, Wartburg, Tennessee. You can find us pretty easy. Just like us there and follow us on Facebook. We also have a website, www.splcwartburg.org. That's WARTB word. splcwartburg.org. That is our website. Check us out there, and we have our Facebook feed, and we have our live streams from Sunday morning on that. You can watch all of our services, and we live stream that on Facebook as well. So you can follow us on the internet. You can follow us on social media, and we have a presence there. And you can check us out on those platforms. We'd love to have you check in and check us out.
Fantastic. Dear listener, you can find links to all that great stuff that Pastor Graves just mentioned at the show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/76. Pastor Graves, thanks so much for your time today and to welcoming us to East Tennessee and telling us a little bit about Appalachia. What are your parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, you got to come and see it. It's a wonderful place to visit. We have millions of visitors a year in East Tennessee, and it's well worth every minute spent here. And we'd love to invite you to come join us at church. People would love to have you and welcome you with open arms. So you're more than welcome to join us, be part of our community. And I think really what I want to leave with is we're getting ready to celebrate our 175th anniversary. It's just the remarkable story of the people of St. Paul Lutheran Church, and the remarkable story of what our Lord Jesus has done here through them, to where you have a robust Christianity, a robust confessional Lutheranism that exists in the heart of Appalachia, that had an improbable and beginning, and it was tested throughout history many times through the Civil War and different depressions and different hardships, but it's made it through all the better and all the stronger through the faithfulness of God's people, but above all through the Holy Spirit working through each and every one of them who love the Lord, love his church, and love the gospel above everything else. And that's what we celebrate here, and that's why we're here, and that's what we continue to do. I hope until our Lord comes back, St. Paul's will be a strong place for the gospel and for all people to come and meet Jesus for the first time.
Amen. Thank you again. God's peace.
Thank you.
Thanks for
God
listening
bless you.
to the Lutheran Cartographer. For more about the things that we talked about today, check out the show notes page. That'll be at lutherancartographer.com/76. Better personal news to share with you. I've decided to take a job offer in St. Louis at Concordia Publishing House. I'll be working on their web applications there. I'm very excited about it. Later on, I may do an episode about the decision to move to St. Louis and all that good stuff, but for the meantime, thought that you might find that interesting. For now, go ahead if you're interested in that Audible offer to check that out at lutherancartographer.com/audible. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Weber. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.